When I'm showing work, the first thing I do with every kind of project, I'll come to more complicated stuff later, but the first thing I always do is think about how I'm going to present the work. So if I've got a new project, it doesn't matter how small it is, how big, I always try to get it photographed, for example, so that, you know, you get the best out of it and you can see how things look in context. I mean, even if I've just got a flyer or a coaster, like one of the earlier projects that I did was just a passion project for myself, and I made these city coasters. I call them tiny guides, and they were essentially tiny little cardboard coasters. They had a city design on one side, and then they had 4 different places on the other side. I got them letterpress. Like, it was a complete passion project, but I spent a lot of time thinking about how they were going to be presented. So I had them all photographed. I had them photographed individually. I had them photographed in a group. I talked about it. I shared why I'd done that. I wrote articles about the places that I visited. And just with that one project, it was picked up by about 3 different design magazines at the time. And what I've realised now is a lot of the time when you're after promotion, you really have to chase it. You have to go after that yourself. So for that just to get picked up, that was quite unusual at the time for me anyway. And that was really just because I'd photographed everything, thought about it really, really carefully. And it was essentially these little coasters. So that's kind of one of the first things I always think about, is how I can make something look as best as it possibly can, actually. So, you can kind of get that across. And often the photograph almost looks better than it does in real life because, it's lit and it's carefully thought about. And it also then shows, how you care about that project and how you value that work as well. And I think then clients are kind of thinking, my work's going to look that beautiful as well. That's kind of what I'm hoping for. My name's Dani Molyneux, and I have a studio called Dotto in Manchester. It's a typographic, lettering, branding kind of mashup. So the Tiny Guide project was really the start of me changing the direction of the kind of work that I wanted to do. So before that, I was working a lot on branding, which I still do and I still enjoy, but I wanted to do a lot more kind of sort of creative typography, more sort of almost with more of an art leaning, where I was kind of, working on things that I wanted to do and, like subjects I wanted to pursue and things like that. So with the Tiny Guides, I was kind of making this project up. I was designing all of the lettering from scratch and just kind of playing with it, and there were no constraints. And because of that project, that did lead to then, to people noticing that kind of work rather than the work that I'd done before. So it getting picked up by sort of creative magazines and stuff. I don't know whether that by itself led to, specific work, but it was kind of like the trigger, the start of many other things. So that then gave me the confidence to carry on, to make lots more different things. And it also started to change the kind of work that people were asking me for as well. So in the past, somebody might come to me and they're like, oh, I want a logo or whatever, which people still do. But now people were coming to me for much more kind of creative lettering and typography projects. And then I was then starting to build up the print shop as well. So I had this kind of outlet where I was making lots of things as well. And it was then working hand in hand. So I was getting asked to do work, but I was also producing work that I wanted to do. And then they started to feed off each other in that way. It is quite hard when you say show your passion projects and things like that, because you don't always feel inspired to make something. And also there's a lot of pressure on people. I think creatives, especially now, particularly with, social media, you see everybody producing lots of stuff. And sometimes that alone almost freezes your brain and you get this creative block, because then you see so many examples, you kind of can't work out what you want to do yourself because you just bombarded with stuff. And if you work full time as well and you're trying to do all these things, it is difficult. I think one of the things I find useful is kind of trying to switch all that stuff off a little bit and starting really small. So when it comes to coming up with something like, you need to have a passion project, most people will jump to like the biggest, most challenging thing they can think of. And actually all it needs to be is something really, really small. And I think if you think about, I don't know, even if is it like a flyer for somebody that, you know, a friend, or is there a song you really like and you're going to redesign an album cover, or I don't know, anything, you know, are you going to make yourself some stickers? It could be something really, really tiny, or just, you know, a sketch a day or something, and kind of try to take the pressure off and have fun with something, and maybe, you know, let it lead to something. And I think once you've made one thing, you know, it can kind of be whatever it is, and then you can build from there. But the other thing is as well, you know, there's no time sort of, it feels like there's a lot of time pressure on this stuff, but really there isn't. You know, we can kind of make things in our own time, and like, I don't know, you can use things from, like, a lot of the times as well, I will look at something I've made ages ago, you know, that I made really quickly. And because of the way social media works, for example, we'll show something that we made. Somebody might see it one day and then we go, okay, that's done. And we forget about it and it's kind of lost. But actually, you know, like we don't need to make everything that sort of fast moving. We can go back and we can kind of change things. We can adapt things. We can show things again. We can develop it. So I think for me, personal projects is just this kind of ongoing experiment of things I want to work on. Sometimes it might be things I want to share with other people, and sometimes it might not. Like I do a printmaking course. I've been doing it this is going to be the 3rd year that I've done it. And I'm doing a lot of screen printing, which feeds into my work. But for the first year of that course, I was learning loads of different kinds of print techniques. Everything that I made was terrible. Like, it was really bad, but it didn't matter because I was learning how to do something. It was really playful. I was getting my head into something else. So I consider that, you know, that was a passion project for me as well, but it's not something I would share with the world, but that was then leading to kind of things that I'm working on now. So I think it's kind of trying to think about things for their own sake, and not necessarily thinking about doing something for the output. And then maybe the output will follow. But I think that can't be the motivation. Yeah. And how things have changed as well. So how, you know, you might have done something a while ago. Sometimes you look back, like I look back at some early stuff and think, oh my God, that was terrible. And then I'll feel like, oh, that's really good because it shows that I've progressed. And then there'll be other stuff that I've discounted as rubbish. And when I've had some space away from it, when I go back, I can actually see all the potential in it now, and I can come back to it and change it. So I think there are, you know, you don't want to dwell on the past kind of thing and look back too much. But I think it's always good to kind of assess, you know, how much you've kind of changed and grown and that kind of stuff. I do think it's important to show process. If, for example, if I'm speaking to a student, you know, I do lots of portfolio reviews and things like that. I think there's a balance about how much process to share. If I see a big project, it's complicated. Sometimes I kind of want to see the thinking, like, this is where it started. This is a problem. This is how I approached it. You know, kind of that sort of almost strategic thinking and experiment and how people work. That is really important. One, if I want to know how I'm going to work with somebody, you kind of can see how they work and how they solve problems and how they approach things and how they learn. But there's a balance, because obviously you can't show that for every single project because it'd just be overkill. So I tend to kind of put little for me, I put little bits of working in some projects. So I might show things like a bit of a presentation or some early sketches, so that it isn't just that kind of final finessed thing, you know, like it's popped out of nowhere. There has been a process. It's not AI or whatever. Don't just press a button and something appears. This is a process and this is how it happens. And, you know, actually, I probably like to share a little bit more of that. I don't show tons of that online, but I do show little bits of it in the portfolio. And for me, it's mainly to go, look, I'm making this stuff, and this is how I think, and this is how I work. I love saying words matter, but what I mean, I guess, again, when you're talking about your work and when you're presenting your work, you do need to talk about it, and whether that's written down or whether you're speaking about it, you have to be able to communicate what you've done, what you've done, why you've done it, all that sort of process. You need to explain it, even if it's, in the most succinct way possible. And that's why I say words matter, because you need to be able to explain your work. So sometimes, there are projects, obviously, that you can put out into the world, and it's good that work can speak for itself sometimes. But really, if you're presenting a portfolio or, on your website, or if you're going to see a client, you're going to have to talk about it in some way. People want to know what was the problem, what was the brief, how you approached it, how you like all that kind of stuff. And that's why just doing the work itself isn't enough. You need to talk about it as well, or write about it, whatever it is. And it doesn't need to be essays as well. People haven't got all day, but so there's some kind of understanding about how you've approached it, how you've thought about it, and how you've finished it. And I think as well, you kind of need to be proud of the work that you've done. So if you can't talk about it, if there's something you kind of like, I've had students, and this isn't their fault, they're learning how to do things, but I'll say to a student, why did you choose this? Why did you do this? Why did you choose this colour? And they'll go, oh, I don't know. But they do know. It's just because they're nervous about talking about how, which is understandable. You've got to practice and learn how to do that. But if you've picked a colour, you've picked whatever, you have got a reason. There's always a reason. You don't just pick things out of thin air. So you just have to learn to explain kind of the important decisions and be confident with that, and kind of stand by why you've done things. Space and pace. I love a lot of catchy catchphrase. So this one, actually, this was one, and the last permanent job I had, my old creative director, always gave me this advice, and I've always passed it on. I think it was really good advice. And it was when I started like showing off projects or, doing portfolios, I would try to cram as much stuff, like on a page. So if it was a page, for example, obviously a website or whatever, wherever you're showing it, but I tried to go like, I did this, and kind of, and he'd always be like, why are you trying to put so much stuff on one page? Spread it out. And even if that means, so now this is how I do things, this is how I space things out. Even if it means I've got one statement, I've got an introduction, then I've got a big hero page, then I've got some detail shots, then I've got a bit of an explanation. I really take people through slowly a project. And it's the same if I was going to talk something through in a presentation. I would kind of go, this is the beginning, this is where I started. Because otherwise, if you show too much too soon, people are kind of bombarded with information and they don't know where to look. And you want them to know why you did this project or what the project was, but they're looking at the end bit and kind of, they're already making decisions about it, and you want to be in control of how they absorb that information. So when I say space and pace, this is what I mean. I mean kind of take someone slowly through your thinking in a project at the pace you want them to kind of absorb it. And it doesn't matter if it takes up, like it scrolls or it's more pages in a presentation, because they can just look. They don't have to stay on one bit for ages. They can kind of look through. So that's what I mean by space and pace. And I think that's really important, to give your work that kind of air to breathe. And again, like sort of celebrate it with space around it and kind of, show it off. If you've worked on a project, some projects are quite simple, some projects are really complicated. But if you're showing something off when it's finished, you kind of want to show the simplest way possible. That's what I mean by saying don't overcomplicate it. Again, so people can easily understand the project. So even if you've done, a load of really complex strategy and there's been loads of, back and forth with kind of concepts and development and stuff like that, when you're showing the work off at the end, that's kind of, you've done all that hard work. You've done all the kind of thinking in the background. So this is the kind of almost like the culmination and the celebration of that. So while I might like hint at a bit of the work that's been done, I don't want to overcomplicate it for the person looking at the project and the work, which is similar to kind of the space pace thing. I want someone to be able to kind of simply see the work and kind of understand it straight away. And that's what I mean by don't overcomplicate it. You know, like you just kind of want to get people to understand things. And it's the same way with writing, you know, like it's why a lot of people say write how you speak and stuff like that. It's kind of, you want people to understand what you're saying without making everything too difficult and too complex for your audience. And that's all I mean by that. Simple is always the best. Good to talk today. You can find me at dotto.studio, or I'm on all the socials at dotto_studio. Basically everything Dotto related. Look out for big words on things. Thanks for having me.